as long as you know what you're doing, as long as you're going in the direction that makes sense to you, that you aren't going to be fooled by dogmas. You're not going to allow yourself get sucked in by any of the what we consider draining energies, right? Those that want to take your attention and put it over here. When you know better and calling to your own inner integrity is takes a little heart and a little courage.
We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
Welcome to the show. It's Toward Anarchy. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Michael Storm. It is Saturday night. It's prime time. We're all around the world on the Republic Broadcasting Network. You can find me on X and Instagram and Facebook and just about everywhere on the internet at Toward Anarchy. And wherever you find me, stop right now. Just take that quick second to click that like button. And if you're so inclined to do so, how about that subscribe or follow button as well? You can follow along with every single show at towardanarchy.com. 2518 is the episode today. And you will, when you get there, you're not going to find a lot. You're going to find a couple of links. You're going to find a link to my conversation with the one-armed madman that I had about 2 weeks ago. And you'll find another link to Dr. Dean Lloyd's conversation that he just had with the one-armed madman, and that's just about it. There might be a couple of other things there when you finally get there. But the idea is we need to listen and pay attention and be in the moment here and have this conversation, because we have a fantastic conversation coming up for you here, and we will dive right into that in just a moment. But, you know, we have to take care of business. We have to do that thing where it's extremely important that you support the network, and we don't ask you lightly to do this. We don't ask you selfishly or selflessly, for that matter. Neither one. We do it for the fact of the network itself. republicbroadcasting.org. Click that donate button over there on the left-hand side, or give us a call, 800-724-2719, extension 3. You can talk to somebody there about how you can support. You can mail in a check, mail in a money order, that sort of thing. Or, of course, you can always visit shoprbn.com for the win-win thing. And those advertisers very much appreciate the fact that you're out there almost as much as we do when you listen to us and let us know. And just to remind you that we're still doing the live Your Health in Mind show Thursday, in fact, in just about 2 hours. Dr. Lloyd and I, as soon as we finish chatting here, we will flip right over and go live on the network. And of course, it's he and I talking about this healthcare thing. You know, we're answering your questions. It's live. You can jump in the conversation with us. And one more thing real quick before we dive into the conversation. I want to, and this is a fantastic conversation. Do you want to know what the topic is? The topic is the truth and what's wrong with the truth. Is there anything wrong with the truth? We're just going to have a nice long conversation about it, because we're taking the whole 2 hours, and we have a special guest, David Enke, who's going to join us. He's a luthier and today a truthier. And so we will dive into that in just a second, but I wanted to tell you real quick about a comic book I read this week. It's been 10 years. It's been 10 years since Marvel got back into the Star Wars business and started printing the regular Star Wars titles. And it's been a good time. No matter what has happened with the Star Wars universe on the screen and the problems with Disney, these comic books have been some of the best that have been written in the Star Wars universe, and there are a lot of comic books in the Star Wars universe. And so it's been 10 years. They're celebrating 10 years. They relaunched the title this year. Of course, I'm a Star Wars fan. I've been looking forward to it, and we've been kind of tracking it all along this year as we've been doing some of these reviews, and we reviewed the other Star Wars titles that have been released so far this year. Not every single one of them, but most of the main ones. And we'll do Dr. Aphra coming up here. I just placed the orders for it yesterday, in fact. And so we have this whole new series, this whole new life that's being brought to the Star Wars universe. This particular new series of Star Wars, it's written by Alex Segura, and you would know him from the Archies and from Superman on some of that Dawn of DC stuff, and Night Terrors, the Batman series, and many other places, including Edge of Spider-Verse, and of course Phil Noto on the art, and that's everything everywhere. That's all you need to say about Phil. This is happening sometime right after the Battle of Endor, sometime not long after the Battle of Endor and the defeat of the Empire, and you have Luke and all of those characters, Leia, Han Solo, Chewbacca, all those guys running around. And it's the early years of the New Republic, and they are coming up against remnants of the Empire itself, and a lot of pirates using former Imperial technology. It's been converted. They've converted the Imperial tech to their own uses, and including some of the big cruisers, and coming up against some of the things like that. They're still out there in the galaxy. And that's not really even the worst of it. There's other, so the New Republic is this fledgling authoritarian government system, for what it's worth, and there are other groups of people throughout the galaxy, other groups of planets and people who have united and don't necessarily want to join up. They're not necessarily any weaker than this new fledgling republic, and trying to recruit new planets into the New Republic, and there are just some of these groups out there that just don't want to be a part of that. They're not really interested, and frankly, they think if they had to resist them, they could, and so they're battling. And in this particular case, they're running around in the Fenrir sector, and you see them come up against some of these converted technologies, and they really haven't even got into the battle with, or any potential battle with, these systems, and these, I don't know if you call them rogue systems. They're just systems that aren't necessarily joining up with the gang. You know how I feel about the government gangs, but so we have Leia and Mon Mothma out there, and they're sort of negotiating new members, visiting with people, trying to stop wars, doing the things that they do. And then there's also another story in here as well with Valance, that's sort of the half-human android bounty hunter guy. He's running through this storyline, and he's running around with Han Solo, in fact. And so you have a number of things being set up here in this new look at the Star Wars universe, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope that they continue to bring the top talent, and they have since 2015 when they started doing this. Again, that's what brought me back into comic book shops. Marvel got the rights back to Star Wars, and I had heard something about it, and I hadn't been in and out of comic book shops in, I don't know, it'd been at least 7 years. It probably wasn't quite a decade when I had sort of sold off my huge collection of packaged Star Wars toys, and the only thing I really had left at that time was a complete original Marvel run of Star Wars. And so when they said 10 years ago we're doing a new Star Wars run, I jumped right in, and it was great. I really enjoyed everything that they've done since then. The creation of the Dr. Aphra character, the things that they've done with the droids, the things that they've done with the bounty hunters. And so I'm really looking forward to them continuing to treat it well. Star Wars, it's in your local comic book shops now. All right, so fantastic. That's all done. Let's jump into this thing. As I said, Dr. Dean Lloyd is here, and David Enke is with us. And well, you know Dr. Dean Lloyd, of course. So, real quick, let's talk with David and just find out about David because you see all these fantastic instruments he has behind him. If you're able to see the show, if you're watching the Rumble or the YouTube version of the show, you see that he has these fantastic instruments behind him hanging on the wall, and he is a luthier. And I'm assuming these are your instruments, some of which or all of which you made yourself.
Yes, they are, except the organ that's right behind me.
Yeah, well, that there's a certain level of skill in there that maybe just yeah, maybe a couple
Yeah.
people involved in making that one.
Well, it was kind of funny. I had found a one-off instrument from an antique store when I was about 13, and it was very unusual, and it got stolen, and I couldn't, you couldn't find one anywhere, so I decided to build one, and that's where I got my start when I was that young. So
So
it was
you built a lot of instruments then over
it
the years.
was it was disaster capitalism.
Was
It
it?
was like the crisis of losing that instrument
Sure.
was then a foundational part of my whole life since then. So.
Right. No, and created a thing for yourself. That's really cool.
Well, absolutely. And then about 20 years ago, I had an epiphany as I've been tuning up all these instruments my whole life and building instruments and everything. And I looked down at my body and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm an instrument. My body is
Okay.
an instrument. And then I was like, whoa, I'm kind of like, I need a tune up.
I'm a little out of tune.
And that's when I became an honest truth seeker, just in all seriousness.
Right.
Yeah. So
That's
that's that
awesome.
that's kind of my story. So I kind of invent a lot of things and have fun with it. And I get to work with a lot of amazing people. So
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Can you name drop for us somebody you made a guitar or a instrument for?
Oh, well, most of my clients are through my pickup business, which I'm building amplification systems
Oh
for
wow. Okay.
musical instruments. So, trying to capture the sound authentically.
You're hand wiring pickups?
Yeah, yeah. I basically pioneered the use of uh, a novel material that had gotten released from the Navy and from NASA into the public domain. And it was a special type of piezo material that nobody else had applied to musical instruments until me. And so I was
Wow.
just right there at the right time.
That's so cool.
And it had such incredible fidelity and performance compared to traditional piezo materials. And so I started a company called Pick Up the World, and I was making pickups for all of the instruments all over the world using this material, and been doing it ever since. And name dropping, well, I don't know,
Everybody,
almost,
no, that's what I was gonna say. You're more at the core. That's more of an impactful thing than maybe just the instrument making. I mean, the instrument making's the fun, the art, and everything, but
yeah,
um, it seems to me that there's a tool, a resource that a whole bunch of people need that you found your little niche. That's really awesome. That's a very cool thing.
it's pretty fun. Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, you just did your own thing all along. It's just a neat thing for anybody to be able to say. Yeah.
I feel really blessed because from that technology and the fact that I'm a small business and small company, and about 30% of my work is totally custom. I started working with energy physicists and people that are studying biology, and I began making biofield sensors.
Oh,
I've
really?
got, I've got my pickup systems in the Subaru telescope in Hawaii. that are monitoring the turnstile as it's going around, listening for contamination in the bearings. And so my
Oh,
pickups
wow.
are sensitive. They actually pick up if there's like some dirt in there, and they're like,
Sure.
oh, better clean the bearing, because you got this giant building.
Well, yeah, yeah, the whole thing spins around on these giant bearings. Yeah.
Yeah. So working with the physicist has been, they're a whole fascinating group of people studying Tesla technology and particle physics and all of this type of thing. So there's that, and then in the last 10 years, the sound healers have really become a thing. And so I make the what I believe to be the world's first dedicated gong pickups, and
Okay. Yeah, you get
singing.
the big gong. Bong.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Actually, in the movie Kung Fu Panda, when they had the temple gong, it was actually a real 10-foot giant gong, and it was blowing out their microphones. So somebody called me up and said, "Hey, can we try your pickups on here?" Sent them some pickups, so it's actually in the soundtrack of the
Oh, that's
movie.
awesome.
So
See, we could do a whole show on you and the things you've done, obviously there. But I guess we have an agenda, and we should bring Dr. Lloyd in here into the conversation and get this thing underway because we do have the full 2 hours, shy of the couple of minutes there, of doing taking care of business. So we have plenty of time to talk about it, but it's never enough time to talk about it. It's a never-ending conversation, and I'm glad that we're going to have it. What do you think, Dr. Lloyd?
Well, first, David is a dear friend of mine for many years, and the kinds of, and we're all three musicians, right? So we have that in common. What we also have in common is that we've been keenly aware of when we've been lied to. In other words, we pay attention to when something isn't fitting for us, right? We are truth seekers. We people who have gone through a traumatic time in life uh, have, and that could have been a family situation. It could have been an accident, like myself. I had a traumatic accident that was life threatening. We could talk about a variety of different relationships that we've been in that had not been satisfying. And it came to my realization early in my career that in the medical profession, I was being fed a lie. Now, how was I to navigate all the information I was being given, how the body operated, what was involved, where were the tools that I had, what was the patient, what kind of people was I going to see and help? And I found out early that I was more in charge than I gave myself credit for. And just as a quick story, is we have a board certification, okay, and they'd send the government agency that came to interview me before I went out into the world and practiced, and I was interviewed by one of the agency's head people who asked me the question that was pertinent. So now that you've accomplished this and you're graduating, how do you feel about getting out there and helping people and practicing and going forth with the Oriental medical art? And I answered him in a way I don't think he was prepared for, because I said to him quite convincingly that I am so ready for this. I have been waiting my whole adult life to be in the position that I'm in. I have new ideas that are sound. I am doing experiments. I have a history that shows me insight into the Oriental medical field that is quite unique, and I'm going to be adding to my art. And I'm not only excited, I'm I'm obsessed and I can't wait to get out there. And he gave me a look that was very much like a deer in the headlights look, like he didn't know quite how to respond to me. I was so convincing and confident that it almost caused him to, you know, almost not be able to respond to me. And he came back with this, I see. And he left the room and he said, okay, the interview's over. And so he ended up talking to my superior, all right, the head of the dean of the school, and he also talked to one of my instructors. And the instructor, his name is John, and he said, you know, you've got one of your students that I'm a bit concerned about. He thinks he's going to change the world, in short. And I didn't say it quite like that, but he gave them the impression that I was overconfident and way too, well, cocky, I guess you could say, in his way of addressing me. So John came to me. His name is John Parag. And he said, Dean, you got to watch yourself around these people. You know, they in so many words, said they aspire to mediocrity, and you can't give it all out there. You know, you might feel those things, but you know, you got to be careful on what you're saying because it'll get you in trouble. And so I ended up passing the boards. I went through all the rigmarole that required me to get in the, you know, the licensing and the insurance and the whole gamut. But I did realize that I was on the cutting edge of my art. And I had to, at that time, make a decision whether I was going to succumb to my profession in a way that had molded me, or I was going to do something that was unique. And it was that I did take that leap, and I went into the Maverick stage where I was literally going to different places around in the country. I did go also to China, where I did teach in China. I did classes in Brazil. There's quite a history there, but the main thing is I was my own doctor for myself. I was taking the initiative to say that this is what I was trained to do, but this is who I really am as a healer. And when I realized that, I had this phrase come into my mind, and Dr. Rosen and I had talked at length about this. And just as a brief, for those that don't know Dr. Rosen wrote the book Cruising the Epiphany Highway, and he was my partner in this project called the Evolving of the Species, and I have a website called evolvingthespecies.com. But the bottom line was, no one can fool you. The worst they can do is give you the tools to fool yourself. So I lived by that, and I questioned most everything. And we realized there was a lot of what I was fed as a student at the time that was not applicable. We weren't able to make sense of it. So my job was to make sense, and that's why I came out with this program, and Dr. Rosen and I, and also realizing that I'm going to have to, if I'm going to have to do this, I'm going to have to attract other doctors that are like-minded, because most of the time I was running into people who were so convinced that their art form was the absolute. Okay, the allopathic medicine model was based on fear, and it's not a system that I wanted to invest my energy into, because I wasn't about fear. I was about becoming aware. And I knew that healing was about becoming aware and being conscious. So I wanted to talk, and I'm really glad that David joined me, because he is one of these few people that I can bounce things off of and get a really cool response, an intelligent response. Because what we found is that we have to be really good at discernment when we're given information, because we're talking in generalities now, but the medical profession has convinced people that they have to live by a sickness model. And that sickness model is not going to work if you want to get healthy. Okay. So I wanted to launch off on that particular state of mind, that particular perspective, that if there's something that is coming across as being, hey, you know what? I agree with you about that. Blood pressure is important, blood sugar is important, blood tests are important. These make sense, but what else? What are you saying about why, I'm afflicted with depression? Give me the reasons. Well, we really don't know why you have depression, but we're going to give you this medication that is going to change your body chemistry so that you become dependent on this medication. That is not, to me, a health model. That is an emergency model. Okay. So, with all of that being said, the truth is what we're given the image that what they're telling us, everything is about, what's truthful, right? But I had to find out what wasn't, and that's why I went on this path. And it's really quite amazing, these discoveries that I've made, because the body doesn't work off of the physical only. Okay, the body works off of how you feel. Feelings were the missing link. Okay, and I had to make sense of that. So, with your contribution, both of you, I'd like to hear, first of all, what you think of where your perspective is on how you arrived at where you wanted to pursue the truth in your own unique way, and what was it that was holding you back, and what you found to be useful, and what tools were useful for you.
Well, excuse me. Yeah, let me get a drink. David, why don't you go ahead and jump in, because everybody's heard me talk before.
Sure. Well, I had kind of a little bit of an epiphany come in, and I kind of subscribe to the concept that all information is available in the ether, in plasma fields. I believe in the Akashic records. I don't think that anything is ever dissolved or hidden. And I had this vision appear that our consciousness, obviously we can have many, many different levels of consciousness. And like when you're looking out into the sky at night and you see the stars, and the stars are like little ideas. You go, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. And then you kind of pay attention and you realize that some of them are moving, and then you might realize, you get the idea that those are planets. Okay, and you start to form a understanding about what is up in the sky. And the lights in the sky are like the ideas. And I think it's really easy for people to get stuck on the ideas, and they think that the ideas are the important thing. But what is really important is seeing the relationship
Oh,
of all of those things. Then you can all of a sudden you see constellations, and then you go, oh, well, these constellations have different energy in them, and you start to build your understanding. But the stars are kind of moving all around, and as your understanding grows and expands and evolves, the little idea points change and move, to fit the bigger picture. And that's kind of what I think we're, addressing in seeking the truth, is not getting stuck in these little pinpoint concepts. We have to be willing to as we zoom out and see the bigger picture, we learn more things, we encounter new things, our consciousness expands, and then all of those little ideas get adjusted to suit. And that's really the important thing, is the relationship. So we try not to get stuck on the ideas themselves. And it's like when somebody says trust the science, and they're pinning down these concepts as fact, but then somebody else comes with another scientific approach and proves that those aren't actually fact. So
That's interesting, because I keep having this thing kicking around in my head here recently about the truths being different than facts. And I think that's exactly what you're sort of describing there. There's something that's factual in the science that they're speaking about, but their truth is entirely different than my truth per se. I certainly fall on the other side, on the cautious side of their so-called medical vaccines and solutions. And so I definitely believe that there are two truths to that, and there's only one set of facts in that reality. And so you take and you look at just in the way that they will word something. And I'll give you a specific example of one that I had just seen here recently, and this was in relation to the measles vaccine, because of course measles is the big thing right now, or supposedly the measles is a big thing right now, and they want you to believe that the measles is a bigger thing than it is right now, because just like Dr. Lloyd was talking about, that fear factor that drives our medical industry. So what they say, side effects, these are quotes, this is not my words here. What they're saying, the proverbial they, side effects from an MMR vaccine can include soreness, low-grade fever, mild, non-contagious rash, fever-associated seizures, temporary blood clotting, allergic reaction. I mean, what they don't tell you, and this can be shown in all the numbers. There's nothing, I'm not, this is all facts that people can look up. They don't have to believe my particular opinion on vaccines about this. We've discussed this over and over again over the years. Side effects may also include neurological and autoimmune diseases. Approximately 1 in 640 children vaccinated with MMR2 will experience seizures. According to data from VAERS, about 40 cases of death and permanent injury resulting from any measles-containing vaccine are reported annually. That doesn't include the tens of thousands of other vaccine damages and deaths that are caused every year. And of course, the truth is that measles is out there right now, and it's in the news, and they're paying attention to it. And there's obviously there's something there to pay attention to, but the facts is that the MMR, the vaccine, kills and injures more people annually by far, exponentially by far, than measles does. So the difference between truth and fact there.
Yeah, and if I might jump in, what you're reading is the kind of information people attach themselves to feel like they have something that's valuable, right? I mean, that information is secondary to what you do for yourself. What you do for yourself is you fortify your immune system. You're obviously aware of the environmental changes, but the state of mind, and the greatest power is the power of the mind. And I've noticed that over the years that people have, because they've been so indoctrinated to think of disease as something that they have to run from. They have to be afraid of, right? And so the system, if I was to call the medical system an industrial system, medical industrial system, is designed to make you dependent on the system. That's a control mechanism, right? When we talk about independent doctors or doctors that are independent, they know that the system is there to control them as well. Okay, we even have the quote, "The slave in a white coat," and we used that back in the '90s. You know that we were told that we had to provide care in this particular manner, which has validity, but it isn't to be the master, let's say. Okay, right? You have a standard of care protocol that has some validity to it, but it also falls into a category of taking the power away from you. Now, in an emergency, that's a different subject entirely. You know, if you're in a place where you have to deal with bleeding and it's emergency, got to deal with the bleeding from an accident or something. But what you just read was a synopsis of statistic, okay? And people like to use statistics to validate the information that they've been fed. Okay, so here we are in a situation where we're talking about what's wrong with the truth. Well, the truth, as you pointed out, isn't isn't clearly in focus when you're talking about a particular disease, like measles, for example. So the questions I would be asking if I was, faced with information like that and saying, well, those are the symptoms of the disease. What's the cause of the disease? What's the environment around the disease? And how is this, is it ubiquitous? Is it something that's just in a particular area, like in this one section of the country or something like that? So when you're taking in, the more information that you have, the better off you are. So please, if you're out there and you're hearing of like this measles problem, don't use one source. In my case, I've
Do
got
use one source. Go look at the actual numbers that these health organizations, these governmental health organizations say are attached to these things. Look at the numbers for yourself. They're not hidden in there. They just don't tell you those numbers. They focus on their truth of it, like I was saying.
right, and that's
Yeah,
the way.
yeah. I think you can trust. I think you can trust when they say that there's X number of people that are being damaged, and they just aren't telling people, and people don't go looking. They just take the advice. They've accepted those have truths as fact.
Right, and that's part of the discernment that we have. When I was discovering how people that the patients that I was seeing very often have seen other doctors, and they failed. They failed to, they'd come. For example, I was working in an oncology clinic at Livingston Medical Center in San Diego, and we'd see patients that had come to us after three different regimens of cancer treatment, and they'd have doctor after doctor after doctor that would just fail in terms of their treatment program. And they'd come to us exhausted. They'd come to us very sick, and their last legs. They'd have second mortgages on their house. They'd be completely, drained financially. And this has only escalated since the '90s. So the purpose of us trying to introduce a type of perspective is that when you're lied to, you get angry. I would. I mean, there's that naturally, I would say, you lied to me. How could you do this? What is it that I need to do to find out what I really need to know about? And the bottom line for me was that I had to become more educated than they were. And to do that took quite a bit of research. But what I found in most of the cases that I was seeing with patients is that they were given a sliver of the truth. They weren't given the whole picture.
Yeah, that's it. They're not fed the full story. And I think to circle back around to actually answer the one question that you did ask directly about our own little truth path, and mine started really young. I was preteen. And it all comes from counterculture. It's all counterculture. I grew up in the era where they told us that Dungeons and Dragons was bad, that heavy metal was bad, that drugs were bad, that drugs are bad. Okay, that's my generation. I'm Gen X, and that we were told a lot of BS, and we didn't accept it. Apparently, as an entire generation, we kind of stand out in that way, but myself included. And so that sent me down a different path. That sent me down the experimental path. That sent me down the let's take some LSD by the time we're 13 path, and see where the mind takes us. And so that's what started my truth, is that the people around me, authorities, everyone, they were constantly lying to me about things that it didn't seem like they needed to lie to me about. Why do you need to lie to me about Dungeons and Dragons, about fantasy, about indulging in being around people you enjoy and playing games with them, and engaging in conversation and theory and fantasy and just everything that goes along with it? Why do you need to tell me that there's something wrong with that? You're going to tell me that heavy metal music is a bad thing, that there's something wrong with heavy metal music? I've listened to it myself. There's nothing wrong with it. In fact, if you're listening to certain bits of it, they tell you about history, they tell you about science and sociology and the law. I mean, you just, where are you listening? What are you listening for? So it's obvious that there's something other than a fact that exists here. It's just their truth. And so I just found that truth was found in more places than just the one they claimed.
And you have to
I,
do that experientially,
Oh
David.
yeah.
I had heard of a study that somebody did that said that heavy metal kills plants, and they and so they had the plants all sitting there, and um, they gave some of the plants classical music, and then they said, oh, the plants just grew really great and everything, and then the other ones they gave them some heavy metal, and they apparently they all wilted, and so this was one of those trust the science things. But talking about the measles, circling back around, it kind of reminds me of learning about polio and the history of polio, and
Mhm.
also other diseases, plagues, and things like that. But polio is just a whole series of symptoms that they could say, oh, well, this looks like polio, and they blame it on a virus or something like that. But
Yeah.
it turns out that it was actually toxins in the environment
Yeah.
that were giving everybody these specific symptoms, and then they come in and diagnose it as polio, but it was actually toxins in the environment. When they removed those toxins, then the disease uh, you know profiles went away. And you say, well, what did you change? Well, we stopped using DDT, and then the polio went away. But then there were even other things that were giving people polio symptoms. And so it's this idea that the scientists, the mad scientists, always want to blame nature, and say, oh, well, this is a natural thing. This is, the nature is out to get you, and it's part of the fear mongering. And so they always want to give you this sort of scapegoat and blame it on nature. But it turns out actually it was probably something that the scientists were doing, that they were putting toxins in something and it made a whole bunch of people sick, and then they called it a disease. I mean, so look at Lyme disease. You go, oh, well, these ticks are spreading Lyme disease and everything. And then it turns out that it came out of Fort Detrick, and it was a bioweapon that they were, putting into the ticks. You could look at Morgellons disease, and you go, well, where does that come from? It's like these chimeric things that are self-assembling in the body, and they go, well, this looks like a bioengineered thing, and there's a lot of data to support that that's exactly what it was. It was an experimental bioweapon, gave people Morgellons disease, and I think, well, what if these psychopaths that are doing all of this stuff, what if they've been doing this for hundreds of years?
Well, I mean, Fauci's been doing it for 40,
Yeah,
so
so he's almost there, and
eh.
yeah, and all of these people with their different eugenics ideas that the things that we've been calling diseases and leading up to the measles, maybe this stuff is really being introduced. No, it's not naturally occurring. It's, when we got measles as children, maybe it was something in the baby food and we just got a toxic buildup of it, and to the point that finally we just had to clear it out, you know, or maybe it was being, introduced into the environment in some way, and it was making people sick that way.
It's a
What was
challenge. Sorry,
Go
David.
ahead.
I just wanted to point out that it's a challenge for people to sometimes hear such things, because keeping an open mind requires that you that you have to look at the way that you were programmed, how we were brought up to perceive these diseases, and we were be so convinced that it looks a certain way. And the main objective, and I say this, and I've said this before, but I say this as a very important part of what David's bringing up, is that the purpose of doing the indoctrination, it takes a long time for the progression. Generations need to be fed this information so that they adopt it, and that means that it becomes part of their belief system. The disease works like this, and this is what you need to be afraid of. And when it challenges people, if you get fear, doubt, confusion, anxiety, guilt, shame, anything negative emotionally, means you don't understand. But when you put your place in the position of a student, right, and you say, okay, those things are not clear to me. There's something I don't understand. Then you're safe. Then you're not buying into the trip. Go ahead, David.
Well, and so they're telling people to be afraid of nature. Well, we can't get away from nature. It's all around us. And if there's all of these pathogens running around in nature that are out to get us all the time, that's a scary thought, right? But if we realize that there's psychopaths like Bill Gates and Dr. Fauci that have been doing this kind of thing all along, we don't have to be afraid of them. We understand it. If they are creating this stuff, that's actually something we can fix. We can stop them. We can see what they're doing. We can't stop nature, but nature's not the problem. But we can stop these people and say, hey, let's take the poisons out of the food. Let's stop making people sick. How about we choose wellness protocols that aren't reliant on your chemicals? That would be a good thing. And so it's an empowering thing to realize that actually the solution might be a lot simpler than these virus theories of that these things are mutating in the environment, and it's just a matter of time before one of these things gets really bad, and then we have the Black Plague again or something. What how they're trying to promote this thing. So it's great news that we got out of the WHO. I mean, that's like a big that's like giving the finger to those guys, because they really are kind of the head bureaucracy of the cabal that's orchestrating these illness scenarios on a massive scale.
Which,
but I don't, we don't have to go off topic on that.
No, but it's the way that the culture, as a culture, you're controlled, is by whatever, putting your attention on whatever, the media is telling you, or whatever the, the authorities, quote unquote, are telling you to put your attention on. If you're in a place where, and Michael, you have had a lot of experience with those kinds of people that have tried to convince you that anarchy is a crazy idea, right? That what you're thinking of isn't about freedom or about independent mind. So you have been able to develop a skill, and I'll give you credit for this, to be able to cut through that. But you have a lot of knowing how other people process and how other people think. So when I see a patient, it's important for me to identify how they see themselves, right? How they look at themselves and see what, because I like to know their age, what generation they've been brought up in. I need like to know what part of the country they've been brought up, if they're, they've been brought up in someplace in Europe, or if they've been brought up here in the States, or something in Mexico. In other words, different cultures have adopted ways of survival that make that kind of mindset where they see, how they see themselves. So I like taking in all that information. How is it that you, and I'm kind of switching the role here, being more of interviewing you, because I've found that you're unique in your ability to question authority really good, but you got to bring in something that's a solution. And what the truth is for you is the independent approach, being the independent truth seeker. And I really like that attitude. So can you expound on that some?
Yeah, I think it's just all natural. I think there are a lot of things that just lead directly to it about my station in life, my position in life, where I was born. And just lucky enough to be born into at least a family of readers. So there was some chance that I might be interested in picking up books and learning and things like that. And so I think that set a pretty good foundation. Believe it or not, something of a religious and church foundation early on. Just the closeness of it, the family, something that I didn't necessarily have with a working mother and no father around. So that would it took on some of that role, but that ended very quickly before I was a teenager for sure. And um, a lot of it just being an only child. So the only person I ever had, an only child and a latchkey kid from the time I was, I don't know, 9 or 10, until I was about 14. There was nobody home, at the end of the day. And just that time alone, being smart, having only myself to answer questions and only my own resources. Long before the internet, you had to go out and find things or do things to actually learn about them. And so I learned to seek knowledge, I guess. And so it's just a natural progression. And again, just so many people who were authority, people who were supposed to be smarter than me, which, frankly, was obvious that there weren't that many people around that were smarter than me, technically or factually. And so it quickly became that, well, they're lying to me. Why are they lying to me? Is it because they're stupid, because there are so many stupid people around, or is it because they have an agenda? And then once you find out that there's an agenda, and then you find out about the sort of human need to group together, and you start analyzing. And this is by the time you're 11 or 12 years old. Some of us who stop believing in unicorns, even though we never stopped playing Dungeons and Dragons and trying to catch one. coming to realize that, yeah, everybody around you is just kind of lying to you, and you're not really going to get the truth from them if you don't go out and seek it yourself. And the only way to find it and be anything more than just these sort of average people, not that there's anything necessarily wrong with being an average person, but it doesn't suit me because of the way they speak, because of who they are, because of the things that they value over the personal experience, over family. They want the money, they want the big cars, they want the houses, they have all these things. I value none of that stuff. I value the experience of life. I love to have things, and I have lots of things to that credit, but they're not important to me at all. In fact, most of the things that I keep around me, the comic books, the toys, they're collectibles. They're things that are a way for me. That's the economic side of it. It's the other thing. Around 10 years old, I learned what the Federal Reserve was, all that. And so these things that I keep around me tend to be collectibles. They're things that I know that I can exchange for value, something of value down the road, whether it's dollars or whatever.
That is a great segue into. Thank you for that.
We got 2 minutes, and then we got to go to the top of the hour.
Okay, so let me just read this quickly. Page 35 in Cruising the Epiphany Highway. Conned by your own ignorance. Ignorance isn't bliss. It's a con job. Whether or not you know how fire works, it will burn you anyway. No matter what you'd like to think that fire will do, it's a thing. And we're all playing with fire, with various kinds of psychic, mental, emotional, socio-sexual fire. You might as well understand the nature of combustion so that you can constructively harness its power. Playing your own devil, you are bound to ignorance by your irrational need to escape from inadequacy by justifying your self-doubt. Understanding is for enlightened individuals. Thinking is an experience. However, your thoughts are not experience. Belief is for peasants. And we'll pick it up on the other side.
Yeah, that's great. You know me, I'm a fan of the book. I think it's neat. I think it's a piece of art. It's not just a tool for learning. In case anybody's wondering, we're talking about Cruising the Epiphany Highway. That was the first impression that I got about that it was a piece of art. It wasn't just a tool that gets you to thinking. And I think that's part of the artistic presentation of it, is because that helps you. Some people see visually, some people see artistically, some people see mathematically, some people just see words. And so however you can read somebody, if you can take words and math and language and all of these different things and put them in an artistic presentation, why you're just going to reach that many more people. So I think it's a really fantastic tool. I've enjoyed us going through it over the last few years. We've been going at this a little while here, Dr. Lloyd, and we will be doing so here again every Thursday. It's the Your Health and Mind show. We still have another month or so of it to go at least, and it's been really fun. We're talking to people and we're taking your calls and answering your health questions. Dr. Lloyd and I are doing that every Thursday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. I did seem to forget to mention that was actually the time when I spoke about it earlier. We got to go into a break. We'll be right back here on Toward Anarchy to continue.
Free market economy is a necessary but not a sufficient condition for a free society. I have never argued that it's a sufficient condition, only that it's a necessary condition. So I said in there, I gave examples of societies which predominantly relied on market economy, on market mechanisms for their economy, but yet were not by any stretch of the imagination free societies. So I don't believe that's a contradiction. I think free societies are very rare things. And most societies in most time in human history have not been free. So I don't know any simple formula to produce a free society. I only know that if you don't have a market economy, you won't have a free society.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression. Everybody's out of work or scared of losing their job. The dollar buys a nickel's worth. Banks are going bust. Shopkeepers keep a gun under the counter. Punks are running wild in the street, and there's nobody anywhere who seems to know what to do, and there's no end to it. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. The air is unfit to breathe, and our food is unfit to eat. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. My life has value.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
And here we go off into hour number 2, towardanarchy.com to follow along. Wherever you find us, it's at Toward Anarchy, Facebook, Instagram, X. Please just take a quick second, click that like button or that subscribe button. A share would be really cool. Just share the show around. Not that it doesn't get around. Boy, it's everywhere. So we have Dave Enke and Dr. Dean Lloyd is here, and we are talking about truth, and I don't know. Are we can't answer the question. We can't answer the question, what is truth, because it's not facts, right? I think that's what we kind of have talked about in this first hour, is that there's this difference between what's truth and what's factual, and knowing the facts can help you understand why somebody else has a different truth than you do necessarily. I think we've gotten that far.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, and what we're going to need to realize is that our truth will change as we get older. The consciousness shifts. What becomes right for us. So I say, make your ceilings your floors. Make the best that you know, the least that you'll accept. And if new information comes in, then you start to add that to your knowledge base. The thing is that we're dealing with a lot of outdated information, right? We're dealing with space age technology, and we're dealing with these primitive emotions that are way down here, okay? But we need to evolve so that we're able to use this intelligent technology, like AI, for example, to be able to construct a healthy environment. But it's been about one-upsmanship. Right? It's about, gaining more than everybody else. It's competition rather than complementation. Okay. And when we're into this mindset of being, geared towards or seeking the truth, then if you have a system that works for you, maybe you wear the robes and you do the meditation and so on, and you have the Buddhist community out here, or the Hindu community out here, or the Christian community over here. Those are fine, as long as you know what you're doing, as long as you're going in the direction that makes sense to you, that you aren't going to be fooled by dogmas. You're not going to allow yourself get sucked in by any of the what we consider draining energies, right? Those that want to take your attention and put it over here. When you know better and calling to your own inner integrity takes a little heart and a little courage to step out of that, because it's very seducing. The fear-based system is very seducing. The government is fear-based. It makes you dependent on them. How do they control us? They control us by lying to us. They're giving us statistics that may have, some accuracy, but what is it that they're really gaming for? They want to be empowered. They want to use your work, your labor, and make them, the one that they are put on a pedestal. They're the ones that are worshipped. They're the ones that are people give their power to. And I'm wholly against that, because my job is to empower you. Come to me as a patient. My job is to make sense of what's involved and how I can be proper in directing the path for your health and getting what you want, because it isn't so much what I want for you, it's where you want to be. Okay. So the new healer, or the new paradigm, is, and I call myself a healer facilitator, and that makes it so that I'm there as a service to humanity. I'm a friend to humanity. I'm looking at it from that point of view. So everything I do, it comes from that place of, I'm here to serve, but I can't help you any more than I've helped myself. So that's my position. And when we're looking at the word truth, it's not a fixed thing, as David was mentioning. Our truth becomes an evolutionary process. So I've said enough. I just wanted to make sure that we were launched off on the right foot for the second hour.
Well, yeah, because I think we definitely have a truth problem. You're talking about these authoritarians, and the problem isn't that they're lying to people, it's that the people are buying the lie instead of them going out and finding out what's generally easily found information when we're talking about most of these things, whether we're talking about the economy or whether we're talking about the healthcare economy. Either one of these things, there are examples, other ways to do things, and that these people who choose to do them the way they do now deliberately choose not to do those things because they don't benefit them as much, because there's not as much in it for them in terms of money and power. When you realize that a certain percentage of your personal health care, well, all of it's about you, obviously, 100% of it, but some other certain percentage of it is about your your understanding of how to navigate through the system and to be able to get yourself the health and your care. And that's all about the mindset. So some large percentage of healthcare is in a mindset, and it's in keeping a proper mindset that it exists somewhere outside of fear, caution, maybe. That's just this side of
I'm
fear.
really glad you mentioned that, Michael, because when you do approach your fears, approach it with caution. Yes, that's a big one, because people will jump into things and cause more harm than good. It's just move with caution. Yeah, please. Yeah, you too.
I'm one of those. I resemble that. I'm a head first kind of guy. Charge head first. Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead.
All right. Gung ho.
Yeah.
All right, David,
Yes.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
We had some really interesting conversation um, last week and the week before, and we were starting to touch on this universal kind of mindset of the 100th monkey. And could you go into that story for us and give us your insight?
Sure. Yeah. I was having all these ideas come in, as they always do, and you know, uh, kind of big ideas, things that I hadn't heard anybody describing, and literally within days, it would just scroll across my Facebook, or somebody there would be a link to somebody talking about it. And I realized that I didn't think that the information or the idea itself was local to me. I just felt like I had the proper scaffolding of knowledge to actually receive the information and make some sense out of it. And that's but that the information itself was coming in through the field. And that explains the 100 monkey thing, is that I'm just one of those 100 monkeys. And I have, say, if it involves electronics or it involves vibrational physics, I have enough data points in my brain that when that information comes in, I can see how it fits. Just as you do with your healing arts, you understand physical bodies and emotional bodies and mental bodies so well that you can, when you have these epiphanies, you have a place for those concepts to rest in your consciousness. You see how, and it expands your consciousness, and it then, you see how it all fits together. And so you've developed the apparatus to receive that information. I'm kind of believing that the information is in the field, and Tesla talked a lot about that. He said, well, I get all my ideas from
out here.
this incredible field of intelligence.
He's not the only person to have talked about it.
Oh,
either.
no. In all the good music that I ever wrote, I didn't feel like I wrote any of it. I just felt like I was open, and I had enough of a framework with my instrument that when the inspiration came in, I was able to just take it and flow it through the instrument. It was completely new to me. I wasn't, intending to create anything. It just came through and it happened. And I think that all knowledge is like that. So when we're really addressing the issue of seeking the truth, well, how do there's things we can do to improve our antenna system.
I was going to say, with a broken antenna, there's a lot of people out there with bent and broken antennas. When you were talking about sort of receiving things in, that's that image that I get, and I can't take credit for it. It's something that stuck with me all the years of producing locally, not for them directly, the Dr. Drew Love Lines show. And that was something that Dr. Drew Pinsky has always talked about in terms of our inability to correct our problems with relationships. Always sort of seeking the same dangerous, wrong people for us in relationships, things like that. I think that's more proof of a relatively accessible, ethereal consciousness, like you're talking about.
Well, and Rudolf Steiner talked about it. He said that the people that are running the world are going to figure out ways to break people's antennas. And so the fluoride in the water, the pineal gland is a good example of that. There's different ways to sort of dumb us down so we don't have that big picture perspective. And but some of us seem to have escaped a lot of those limitations, and we probably, we had to just basically deprogram ourselves.
It has to be in the deprogramming. I was thinking about it as you're saying it, because it's not the fact of being in that place. So, for instance, the counterculture with myself, drug culture, heavy metal music, that sort of thing, that counterculture that existed before heavy metal music and before me produced an entire generation of, well, wusses. I guess.
Well, that's funny.
Now, for those that don't know what the 100th monkey connection we're talking about here, I thought I'd just read it to you and give you the story. I'll just read this off. This is online. The concept is often associated with the story about Japanese monkeys on the Kashima Island, where a few monkeys started sweetening the sweet potatoes by washing them in a stream. The number 100 is not particularly significant, but it's used to represent the idea that a new behavior or idea becomes widespread enough when individuals have adopted it. So
it's memetics.
Yeah. So the 100th monkey phenomenon is a hypothetical concept suggesting that when a new behavior or idea reaches a critical mass within a group, it spreads rapidly
It
through
spreads
the,
rapidly.
yeah, even though those who haven't yet learned it individually.
And it's used by a lot of people within the so-called liberty movement, freedom movement, whatever. They're always talking about that, and it's unfortunate because it sets a lot of them off on a path of looking for some sort of silver bullet that will produce the 100th monkey or shoot the guy that's going to get the 100th. I don't know exactly what the silver bullet is for because I've never seen one actually work. Everybody comes to, oh, well, that's the smoking gun, that's the silver bullet, that's the one that's going to do it, and not one of those things has done it yet. Not 9/11, not Kennedy, not this, not that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's the reverse. It works the other way around. It works from the inside out. And my father was, as much as he was admiring the other artists before him in car designing, he told me that the first car design wasn't a car design made in America. And it wasn't, it wasn't in Dearborn, Michigan, and it wasn't by Henry Ford. It was done a drawing that was done in France, and about a week later, Henry Ford got the idea. So I mean, it was like this timing was like, yeah, right. It went universal. So this 100th monkey thing is what I'm seeing in the medical field right now is a major separation in the direction and where we're going. Okay, I have a personal interest in bringing the medical doctors that are in my particular circle new information. So I've for years been hosting a show that's called Dean's Medical Meeting, and I talk about the latest and greatest in the field of medicine and would be considered the cutting edge of this thing, where we're redefining how we position ourselves as healers. Okay, and we're not here to, in looking at a particular system, to worship these systems. They're not to be worshipped, they're to be used. That's one of the reasons why I became multidisciplined. I don't see Oriental medicine as being appropriate for one patient, but it may be for another, okay? And allopathic medicine may be appropriate for one patient and not for another, that kind of thing. So anyway, David, I know you've got some experience also too with how you've been, with your inventions, you've got this kind of really beautiful artistic mind. But could you give us a little insight into why, when you were knowing that you had to deal with people that were jerking you around or causing you to go off your path, you were able to somehow get through a very difficult time in your life. And I wondered if you would share with us what that looked like and how you overcame it. Give you a big one.
Which ones are you talking about?
well, all right. We've been kind of toying with the relationship topic a lot lately. You know, how relationships just aren't working out. That there's so many times where we've seen men just separate themselves from even going into a relationship because it's where we found that being independent is more our path. You know, there's everything to be said about good things in relationship when you have the right kind of situation where you see eye to eye. You know, you have the same path, you're looking at things so similarly. You've got the 3 C's, you've got compatibility, you've got chemistry, and you've got communication, which holds it together, and all this stuff. And but what I've been discovering is there's been a lot of talk, especially in these comedians, about how they're not the type of person that would work well with the relationship. And that, to be truthful in a relationship, I would have to just, you know, exclamation point about being excruciatingly honest. For me to have a relationship that works, I want it to be 99% awesome. I want it to be that kind of attitude where you are really going for the truth and you're in giving what you want to relate to that person. And when you're not holding back, you're not saying, well, I won't expose your hangups if you won't expose mine. Let's cover these things up. I want it to be a place where you're navigating each other's needs. And if you are really paying attention to those needs, then you can do this dance together. Okay. Now, this has been conceptualized for me for many, many years. And give us some of your insight into that and what you found as being places that you've been tripped up at. Because we all need hugs. We all need to be told we're doing a great thing. We need to be encouraged. We all need that. But
that's what TikTok's for.
Yeah, right.
It tells me all the time I'm a good boy. You don't want to know.
Oh, right there. But it's getting to the place where we're not using AI or any of these other things that are substitutes. It's my position that we get back to being human. And being human is one where we give ourselves permission to not be right all the time. That we give ourselves the saying, I'm still learning. If I'm here, I'm learning. I may have reached this level of satisfaction in my life and knowledge, and I feel satisfied, and I'm always willing to be better. But if you could take us there, David, just to give us some insight into what you found as being places where you've been tripped up and how you've navigated through that to become a satisfied and happy individual. I know that seems like a big thing, but it's really not if you're just taking it on as a kind of where I want to go thing.
Sure. I was in a relationship for 17 years with a woman who had a tiny little baby when I met her, and we had been together for about a month, and she said, "Hey, can I ask you a favor? Do you think we can just tell everybody that he's your biological son?" And I said, "No." I said, I can't do that because that's not true. And she said, well, we could just tell everybody that we met a long time ago and had an affair. And she had this whole thing. Anyway, I continued going out with her, and we got married and did the whole thing for 17 years. And then, things ended. I won't go into all the gory details or anything, but I found out from a...
That's what Facebook's for. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
exactly. I found out from a friend that she had been having an affair with this other guy that was, it was basically there the entire time we were together. And she was lying about it. And I ended up talking with him because he was actually one of my friends, or, quote, in quotation marks. I said, well, why did you guys break up? And he said, well, she was lying to me. And I said, well, okay. And then I said, I asked myself, I said, I've always thought I was a truth seeker. And what was I doing in a 17-year-long relationship with somebody who was literally a pathological liar? She lied about everything. She was really good at it, and I loved her so much, and I just, didn't go and investigate anything. I just wanted to believe. I wanted to believe in her so badly that the red flags had come, and I just, oh yeah, that's just an accident or something. I didn't want to do it. But that was the answer to my question. Why was I with this incredible liar. And the truth was, the answer came, and it was because I was lying to myself. I wanted to believe in true love in spite of what I was seeing. I had these rosy glasses on, and she was my goddess, and so when I discovered all these things after the relationship was over, it was when I found out about all of the deceptions that he was doing, and my rosy glasses just got shattered. Okay, and and then I could start to see more clearly why that happened, and since that time, I look back on it and realize what a gift it was, because I now have such not a cynicism, but I have an ability to recognize falsehood a lot more than I did before, and
You
I
have
think
a better BS filter.
I got my BS filter, and it's mostly to myself. It's
Yeah.
just saying, "Hey, David, stop lying to yourself about this,
Don't let people lie to you.
and don't let people lie to me." And I actually kind of have a way of discerning when somebody is lying. It just feels like what they're saying wobbles. It's like there's truth, and then there's what they're saying, and it's two different things. So it's the thought itself, whatever they're sharing, is wobbly. And
But the real thing is in the air, isn't it?
well,
It's in the air. It's electrically charged. You can feel it coming directly off of them. You know exactly what it is. Yeah.
yeah, and you know when something rings true, and when it rings true, it doesn't wobble. And that's the sensing that I think humanity, it would be, I mean, I think we're moving in that direction, where we're reclaiming our psychic abilities, and we're reclaiming our sensing of what that is and how that works. And I think, it's like, well, why is everybody lying about everything? Well, because they can. Well, why can they? Because everybody's been kind of, I don't want to say dumbed down, but they've had their antenna systems damaged, and so they're not able to pick up on the clues, and so everybody's kind of like that. And so when, if nobody can tell that I'm lying or not, you just run around and lie, and and so I think that's
acceptable.
kind of that's the what's created the symptoms that we're living in, where we've got disinformation, misinformation, and everybody, it's like, well, there's this opinion here and this opinion here, and all the different opinions are all sort of battling with each other. And partial truths, a partial truth to me is the same as a lie. It's just like, why are you omitting those other things? And so uh, I think I don't know. I came out of that experience with, I realized that the only way I was going to heal myself is just to devote myself to the truth. And so every day I'm turning around and looking at myself, and I'm checking in, and I'm looking for the distortions, and I'm looking for, places where, I was programmed to see things in different ways, or I taught myself to see things in different ways that weren't exactly the whole truth. And so that's where the healing has come from. And it's been awesome,
And it's
and
easy, right?
it's really easy because you don't have to make anything up. And
That's
that's a
the
big
best
thing.
part, right?
And and I really love people, and I get along with pretty much everybody. But as far as being like really close with people, or being in a intimate relationship or something like that, I mean, I don't know that many people that are really at that level, to where I have that supreme compatibility. I see where people are, their desire to have a relationship is so strong, it just feels like tentacles coming on me, and I'm like, oh no, um, so I'm living a very simple life now in my little hermitage, and I have some cats, and I'm just working on inventions and doing all sorts of things like that, and I feel great. I'm totally satisfied, and I'm really glad my hormones settled down, because I feel like you know I'm not tempted to go and be seeking partnership in any way, shape, or form. I'm just literally not looking for it, and that's awesome.
What would
That's super liberating right there.
you,
You know,
you're living a life of a monk in a way, you
I
know.
totally am. Yeah.
And
And
it's
there's a reason they do that, though, and that is that separation from those relationships, because those relationships, unless you build a relationship together, there's very little hope. And as you get older, if you haven't built one of those relationships together, the chances of doing so are obviously they're less. You just don't have the time to do it. uh, and it's only going to it has to get harder, right, as our world continues to grow and people continue to disconnect from each other.
well, it's very good that you brought that up, David. Thank you for sharing. It's oftentimes when you said this, the truth is in there, but it's not there. I would give a visualization that if you have two tuning forks and they're the exact same tone,
Right.
and if you hit one, the other one will start to resonate. Okay, that's sympathetic resonance. And
Right.
we are like magnets for each other. When we walk into a room and we see somebody that we know we've got some familiarity with, and we immediately are like this sympathetic resonance. We come right back off of each other, right? And that there's that in what we like to perceive in Chinese medicine. Um, there's a obscure treatise that isn't talked about, but it talks about the harmony with people and how that the culture, if they're listening to music that is making them happy or they can relate to, and it's harmonious, right? That the culture will evolve around that music, around that kind of energy that brings the sympathetic resonance of the culture together. And when we're like magnets, right, and we're attracting people to us, we become really good at being filters. What comes through that is the truth and what isn't. Hey, I like what you just said, but that other stuff, I'm not so sure I buy. Okay, that might be. I got to think about that, or I'm not buying that other part. You get really good at how you use your energy, because there's so many ways of us getting sucked in to things that aren't working. And David mentioned in a relationship how he wanted it to look a certain way. I've been in the same situation myself, but it's a kind of it's a refinement. The higher you go vibrationally, your frequency, the more subtle the healing becomes. The more in tune, and I love that word, Michael. I've talked about this before. That word, in tune. That's where intuition comes from. And when you build the relationship with the psychic ability to read each other, that's where you become better. You know, if it becomes an improvement, you make yourselves better. You expand yourself. You're not just you. You're you and this other person that makes life better. And it becomes beautiful. And you start making this orchestra together. And so that when you've had moments that are in that place where you've experienced it, it becomes haunting to you. You want more of it. It draws you in, so you can. How good can I feel? How good can this be? And it pushes the envelope, right? It pushes you to your limits. So when we're seeking the truth, we're challenged. Whoa. I mean, big time challenged, because we have got to have the integrity and the wherewithal, and most important, the desire. That's something we can't give anybody else, is the desire to pursue that for ourselves. And when we find it, and when we find it in someone else, your jaw drops. What? Is this real? Can you find, is this happening? So, Michael, I see you acknowledging you're getting my point. Is that true?
Always. Yeah, we definitely live on the same plane of existence there for sure. I obviously there is one difference between us here, and that's that I have a long-term relationship. I have found that kind of thing with somebody, and it was, and that was what I started to bring up the point with you earlier, David, when I said it was easy. That relationship was easy. There was, if it was hard, I wouldn't do it. I'm lazy.
Mhm.
Then you've been
It's,
blessed. All I can say is that I would like to see more of it. And most of the
Well, when
times
I say easy, I mean, it's not that it's not work. It's not that you don't have to put in the effort. You have to want to have a relationship, and you have to know when to keep your mouth shut, and you have to know when to open your mouth and say something and make sure that your voice is heard. And those are things that people aren't able to do themselves, let alone in a relationship. So, yeah, it's no big surprise to me that people like me, people of a like mind as mine, would choose to be or would end up otherwise in a solitary sort of existence, ultimately by choice, realizing that the effort to maintain a relationship was more than somebody was willing to put out, and usually it's on their side. I know that men are bad, women are bad. There's bad people, bad relationships, and bad things, but there's something about men and the adventurous spirit. There's something about the very nature of the male of the species and what they generally have done historically, um, and who we are wired to be, that requires us to have a grounding force in a partner, but also someone that doesn't tie you down at the same time. And those are two, to find those two things in one person that's capable of that. No one person should have to do that. That's why all of the greatest minds, and men that have long-term relationships, know that the reason they're as good a man as they are is because they have as good a woman as they do, and that woman ultimately let them be the man that they are and encourage them to be the man that they are, didn't keep them from it. What's the one thing that keeps most men from being a good father?
yeah,
Mother.
what you've touched upon is a very unique chemistry thing, where when the woman seeks out the man and sees that he's gone far enough for me to want to pursue him.
So
You know,
all that takes is a cigarette in your mouth, a motorcycle, and a leather jacket and long hair, and she just has to be up in the
oh, there
the,
you
the
go.
up in the the very upper floor, looking out the one round window, right?
Yeah, well, so much of what we've been experiencing is barter, you know, and I say that the barter system kills spontaneity, because being spontaneous is magic. You just do the dance. It comes in, and you play with it. If you can indulge me with a little story about Adam and Eve, and tell me what you think of it. But Adam and Eve were in this garden, beautiful, perfect paradise, you know. And Eve is doing her thing in the house. She's making the bed, she's cleaning the house, she's cooking food, and Adam is out there, hunting, and he's bringing home the turkey, or he's bringing, he's keeping himself to protect Eve from the saber-toothed tiger, and Eve is out there cooking all the herbs. She's got an eye for that. She's discerning. She can pick things out better than Adam can, because she's more in touch with nature. She's more sensitive. And Adam is, he's a stronger guy, and he can get out there and he can, do the muscle through things, kind of, and he can tear the skin off of off the bear, and make a nice rug for Eve, and she loves this, and they get along really well, really, really well. They're in paradise. What the heck, So anyway, one day Eve goes to Adam and gives him this eye, and points the finger at him, says, "Adam, come here. I want to talk to you." And so Adam's like, "What's that look about?" I've never seen that look before. And so she starts to pet Adam, and she starts to take off his shirt, and she starts to undress him and take his pants off, and she's undressed. And Adam is going, "What's going on here?" And all of a sudden, Adam gets an erection, and she starts to show him what to do. And all of a sudden, they're going at it. They're doing the thing. And the sex is great. He can't believe he feels this great. But all of a sudden, boom, explosion. He has an orgasm. And oh my gosh, Eve, what did you do to me? And he lies down right next to Eve and says, "Oh, that was amazing. How did you do that? Where did you learn to do that?" And all of a sudden, he starts to feel weak. Now, Eve, on the other hand, she has an orgasm, and she's so feeling great. And oh my gosh, I'm so relaxed and happy and in love with you and all these wonderful things. But Adam, he's drained. He doesn't know what to do. So he kind of rolls over and doesn't say anything. And Eve is trying to cuddle to him and isn't getting very far. He's kind of like, "I don't know what I'm feeling right now. You just turned into something I never saw." So the next day, Adam is out there and he's trying to hunt, but he's a little shaky with the spear, and he's a little uncertain. So he gets back home and he goes, I couldn't catch that turkey. We're not going to eat tonight. What did you do to me? I don't have any power. What's going on with me? So they go to bed at night, and Eve is like, "I want more of this, So, but Adam, he's, "All right, yeah, I guess I do want more of it too." So he gets on. So they get it on, and then they do the thing, and boom, he has another orgasm. He's going, "Ah," and he turns over, and "You did it to me again." Only this time, he marches out of the house. And he's out there in the woods, and he's figuring out, "Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? This is happening, and I can't believe it, but I got to figure it out." But he comes back the next day, and he was out hunting all day, and he was tired, and he comes home, and he caught a rabbit. He's not that affluent. He didn't catch the big turkey, but he got a rabbit. So he comes home, he brings the rabbit, and he goes, "Eve, cook this." And she goes, "What's wrong with you? We had this beautiful thing, and you're beautiful and wonderful, and I love your manly, and you love my womanly, and what's going on?" And so he says, just cook this, and I don't know what's going on. And he goes and leaves again, and he comes back in 2 days, and he's out there hunting, but he's cooking for himself. He's eating for himself, and he comes back and he goes, "I wanted to do that thing." And Eve's like, "Where have you been? Why did you take so much time away from me? I've been hungry." And she says, "I don't know if I want to do the thing anymore." And Adam says, "Well, yeah, you do, because I want to." So they do the thing. And then they get it over with, and he has his orgasm, and he's doing the same thing. He goes out there. And Eve is starting to say, "I don't like this." So Adam keeps doing it. They do this for, weeks and months. And finally, Eve says, "No more. You come back to me, you bring your rabbit, you bring your turkey, and I'm not doing this anymore. And Adam goes, whoa, no, 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 hold the horses. No, 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 you got to do the thing. And she says, no. So Adam doesn't know what to do. So he goes out into the woods, only this time he goes deeper into the woods. And he's gone for 3 days. And he starts to realize that she's getting hungry. And so he comes back. And when he comes back, he says, you won't do the thing, but I bring home the turkey, and you want this turkey, don't you? And I own that bed that you live on. I own this hut we live in. And I own all the tools because I made them. And you need me to survive. So Eve goes, whoa, whoa, I got to do this? I mean, I gotta do what he says? I guess I won't survive unless I'm with him. So Eve does it. She puts up with it, but she's not satisfied. She's not happy. She's not her own. She has to play the game because the man is bringing home the turkey. He's bringing home, he has to build the house. He has to protect her. He's stronger. He's, able to keep her, warm and safe in nature because he's physically able to do it. But Eve is more sensitive to nature. And that's why we're all here. That's why she knows her cycle and her ability to reproduce, the reproductive imperative that's born in her. So now we've got this barter system, right? And here we are living in a world where if I, provide you this, then you give me what I want there. And men have been mostly programmed. They've been afraid of their feelings, and they are hence more afraid of women, where women are more angry. They don't know how they feel. They can't be empowered themselves, and they play the man's game, so they more resent men. Okay? So now you've got this battle that's been going on for thousands of generations, and it hasn't been resolved until recently. And that's why I put it out there that we have a new paradigm, that we go beyond the reproductive imperative and see each other as individuals first, and then use the tools that we were born with, the equipment, to nurture each other in our own way of understanding. Because when you know how you got there, you have a way of navigating how to go to where you both want to go. I do like my story, guys.
It was pretty exciting. There's a couple
absolutely.
of cliffhangers in there, yeah.
So if there's anything that we've been missing, is the ability to be excruciatingly honest. And we're going to find the truth with each other, okay? And we can't, no man is an island. We have to be, I've had my alone time like you have, David and Michael. I'm sure that we all need to have that time where we're working it out for ourselves. But remember that we're not going to solve this by, convincing ourselves that we have all the answers. I've attained a certain level of awareness. I'm a happy man. I don't make a big deal about it. But when I say that I'm satisfied, I have to back it up. I'm not faking it. I don't want to fake it for myself, because if I do, then I'm trying to convince others to buy into my own trip, and that's not mine. That's not for me.
That should be easy enough, because there's only just a few paths in terms of what we accept as happiness, and there's sort of a real path, and there's a denial path, and then there's the let's just cover everything up with money and success or fame or something like that path. So there's not really that many choices. The problem at this point is we're now seeing these other lifestyles in front of us all the time. Why it's interesting that we've been able to develop this change in our relationships, this change from women basically being property that we bargain with, and to where they're just people. And that at the same time that we've been able to see more and more of the excess and what those people are doing who live in excess, and how they don't value the relationships that we talked about before. They just don't value the relationships. They value the things that they have, the power that they have, the power that they can influence over a relationship to get the things that they want. It's not even a bargain anymore. It's I am ultimately more rich and powerful than anything or anyone you know, or that anyone is ever going to pay attention to you, little girl. And so you'll play the game, and we see a lot of people fall for it, and it's too bad, because traditionally, I think how we got to the point where we saw the women as being people and not property is that being home and being in the relationship and creating the home and seeing what happens when you take the wife out of the home and you put her to work, and you do, and because these are all relatively new things to us.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's a good, very important point. Is that when you're especially with men, is that they tend to cover up their insecurities by overstructuring things.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, make it too rigid, too conformed. That's why we got a society that we have now. I mean, it's overstructured. That's one of the reasons why being toward anarchy is more solution oriented rather than breaking things. You got to break up the things that aren't working, right? I've said for years that the allopathic Western medical mind has a lot of valuable information, but the system needs to self-destruct out of the mercy of humanity.
Yeah, we're
Because
not going to lose the important parts of what exists within allopathic medicine if we destroy what is the current medical industry. Yeah.
yeah, and to your other point is that E equals MC squared, right? That's the famous equation from
Hmm.
Einstein, right? Well, it's the equal sign that we're talking about. And men have to be very careful about not trying to control women. We're not. That's not the game.
And
You if
and women have to be very careful of it to not to try to control men.
Exactly. That's why when you can come at that point, the equality point, rather than one dominate the other, and
Yeah.
it become an inequality, then you're not doing the power struggle thing. And it's power has no mind
It's
of its.
so much easier to work as a team. And speaking of somebody that has a successful long-term relationship, we have always done everything as a team. Now, granted, I was raised by women. I didn't have a father around. So I was raised with a respect for women, and I was raised in a household where there wasn't anybody else that was considered to do a job. You did. It's this come up the other day in my life, because it's a thing, noise the piss out of me is what it does. Um, somebody comes up to me and says, "Oh, you're doing that to score some points with the wife." And I said, "No, absolutely not. That's the difference between you and me. I don't do the things I do, any of this. I don't do this show. I don't do what I do around the house. I don't do what I do in life to score points with anyone. I do those things for two reasons. They need to be done, or I feel like doing them, and that's it."
Yeah, so much of life is about winning, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got to win. If you don't,
I'm winning. I'm alive. I wake up every day. I won.
yeah. Well, then you're in that success mind, right? You're victorious. You're bringing about things like David in his life. He's making things that are allowing him the satisfaction of doing his art, and he isn't being controlled, isn't having anybody tell him what to do. He doesn't have to listen to anybody if he doesn't want to. And that's an ability that when you reach that independent place of independence, then you can consider, and it takes all the courage, all the muster you can, just to approach the altar of love, because that's what we're all really wanting. I mean, we do want to connect. And when you mesh energies that are compatible, the magic is there. You've got it. And so we're striving for those things, and that's the truth. That's what we're all wanting to really go for. Where we have this aim, where when you take aim and you know what you want, that provides direction. And all this other stuff, because half of health is getting away from the disease, right? And the condition. The other half is where you're going.
Well, she has to be a free radical. and that's literally the truth. Then we can honor that in each other, and then you don't have the tentacles, and you don't have the contracts and the bartering and all of the rest.
And one of the things that's neat about that is it only takes one person in the relationship to be able to do that, to be able to give the other person who doesn't understand that opportunity to do that and to learn that.
To be a free radical. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's what that is the pure state of love, is you're just nurturing that person to evolve into their highest possible form. And that means that, you're not making contracts, because they're going to be changing all the time. And so, you're trusting in that life force itself to guide things, but, how many people do we know are ultimately free? Maybe you do a lot on your radio program. You encounter a lot of people that are
not as many as you might think.
That really do know what it's like to be free, and maybe that's a topic of conversation, because that is, I think, the only way we can be free is to, surrender our ideas, our belief systems to the truth, and there it is. And then we're no longer chained to those things. We're not limited by those things. We don't, enter into relationships with expectations. We just are free to be alive.
Good word.
To really thrive.
The expectations thing. That's it. I talk about it all the time. We're down to the last minute here, guys. I talk about it all the time in trying to just generally be happy in life. It's a lowered expectations thing, but that's not really it. That's the joke. It's a not putting my expectations on external people, external things that I don't have control over, and ultimately being pissed off about it when those things don't act the way I expect them to. If I'm not expecting them to necessarily act in any other manner than what is best befitting them and how I know them, then I am never disappointed. And that's true. That holds true in everything that we do in life. If you set the expectation that it's going to do what it's going to do and you're going to respond to it the best that you can respond to it, then I think we're all on the right path to finding a little bit of truth together. Guys, we got to go. Thank you so much, Dr. Dean Lloyd. And David, thank you too as well. I'm going to have you back, and we're going to have to talk about some of your adventures one of these days. So thank you, gentlemen. We'll catch up with you again next time. We'll see all the rest of you next week.